Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, normally, as you know, this is a channel about tabletop role-playing games, but every once in a while I do something different and I talk about things like bass guitars and bass guitar amplifiers. And so today I wanted to talk about the amplifiers that I've recently acquired that I'm really happy with. And this is the Mesa series of Subway heads. And before I get going, I'd like to make clear that I'm not endorsed by them. I don't endorse them. There's no monetary deals going on here. We're not affiliated in any way. I'm just a happy customer. And, a while ago, I decided to maybe retire my giant 45-pound rack, start looking around at something that was going to be really loud, but really light. And I wanted to see what the state of D-class amps were. I went on talkbass.com, where I've been involved for years. I got a lot of good information from a lot of people on the amps forum. I actually used to co-moderate the amps forum quite some time ago. I got some great information from TalkBass member Al Kraft, from Andy Field, also known as Aged Horse, who is one of the Mesa engineers and one of the lead designers, if I understand correctly, and from the recently departed Chef, Alan Loshba, a real loss for the bass guitar community. I've known Chef, or known him through the internet for years, and it was really sad. He just recently passed away from cancer, which sucks. But got some great information from them, from some other people, and went down to, I found a Mesa dealer, and it would turn out there was this place called Killer Burst Guitars in Bethany, Connecticut. I'll give him a little bit of a plug. I go there, and we both have masks on, so we're talking, and it turns out it's run by this guy, John Stafford, who I used to know from Milford Music, who used to help run Milford Music in Milford, Connecticut, some time ago. So at some point we recognize, John, is that you? Ivan, is that you? And we start chatting and kind of catching up and all that kind of stuff. So anyhow, I'll talk about these three amplifiers because I actually bought three of them, so you know where my stimulus check went. But fortunately, I've hooked up with a band very recently, so I should be making money to pay, make all that money back, which is cool. Because one of my holy grails is if I can just pay for my toys, if I can pay for my equipment, I'm doing good as far as gaming is concerned. I do not own a D800, although I may get one just to complete the set, but we'll get to that in a minute. So I'll talk about these three amplifiers. First one right here is the D800 Plus. It's a really cool all solid state amplifier. All of them share this same power section. It's a D-class power section. It's 800 watts. It can be 800 watts into 4 ohms or 2 ohms. They all are 2 ohms stable. So they can all run, 2 ohms, 4 ohms, 8 ohms, whatever kind of load you might have. And so they're all just as loud, really freaking loud. These things are an honest 800 watts, which I was really surprised at and pleased by. They all have some pretty cool effects loops and various foot switchable stuff. I think this one has a mute foot switch. Some of the other ones have channel switchers or what have you, or that kind of thing. This one does not have a USB power jack on the back, but the other ones do. But anyhow, you don't really care about all that kind of stuff. What does this thing sound like? It is a very clear, very solid, very immediate sounding solid state head. It does not sound cold or sterile at all. What it has over the basic D800 amp is it's got an extra, it's got flexible mid-range channels. The D800s, they're actually fixed at I think it's somewhere around 200 and 480 hertz, believe it or not. They don't go any higher than that. But really those are some very useful frequencies to boost or cut for most basses. Somewhere around there really helps quite a bit. But it doesn't give you the flexibility in the upper mids. This one, it's semi-parametric, so you can adjust the frequency center of those two mid-range channels. They both have the voicing control, which is pretty cool. It's like kind of like it starts to give you a bit of a smiley face, but it kind of shifts where the mid-range is as you change it. So it gives you a different feel, as the control goes on. They both have a deep switch. This one also has a bright switch. That's really cool as well. And this one also has a variable high-pass filter. The other one has a high-pass filter. The D800 has a high-pass filter set at about 30 hertz, somewhere around there. Maybe a little bit higher, not too much. This one, it lets you control where that is. And all of these heads actually have that. And that's really useful. You can find this spot where all of a sudden the sound really kind of tightens up. And you're not sending frequencies to your speakers so they really can't handle it. They're just kind of muddying the sound. So actually really cool feature. This amp is just really great sounding, really pristine sounding. I can get a sound out of this thing very close to my Demeter 201S, which I was really pleased about because I really love that sound. But this one has just a really tight, in your face, bam, clean, really lovely sound in a really nice solid state amplifier. Next one I got right here is the WD800. This is kind of based on their really popular walkabout head. It's got the three channels right here that are semi-parametric mids, so it has a bit more extension in terms of where it goes, mostly in the upper range. And let's see what else. They all have headphone outs, by the way, as well. This one has a passive mid control, which is a really interesting animal, because it does a little bit of boosting as well, the way it's set up, but it's a lot of cut. And this one does not have a bright or deep switch. The bright switch, this is a brighter amp than the 800 Plus and the 800 for sure. So it certainly doesn't need a bright switch. Doesn't really need a deep switch either, because there are things you can do to kind of recreate that. You can boost the bass a little bit and cut some of the low mids, and you can find exactly where that lives, and boom, all of a sudden the sound gets a lot fuller sounding. It's a trick I learned a long time ago with other amplifiers. It doesn't have the deep switch. I find that it doesn't really need it. This is a different kind of animal. It has kind of more of a tube type feel. It does have one tube in it. It's got this great control right here. It's a damping control, and it changes how the power amp actually works, or how it feels. And so at high damping, it has that same kind of really immediate bang, like sledgehammer on concrete feel that the D800 and the D800 Plus have. You put it in medium, which is about my favorite. It starts to soften up a little bit. And in low damping, it's got this real baseball bat against trampoline sound. It's got this kind of it's mimicking this tube power amp compression thing that's going on. It's got this sound of it reminds me of the sound of the Ampeg fridge on STP's Core album, which is not his regular rig, but that's what he used in the studio. It's this really interesting, really, really cool sound. This is a really neat sounding amplifier. When I just owned these two, what I would do is go back and forth, and it occurred to me that the amp I just plugged into sounded better than the other one, because my plan was to get these amplifiers and decide which one am I really going to keep. Turns out I really can't do that, because they're very different animals, and they sound really, really good. The last amplifier here is the TT800. And this thing, it looks really intimidating with lights and knobs. You just have to look at half of them, and then you realize, okay, it's just an amp with two channels. It's got the bright and the deep switch, which is really cool. TT is like twin tri-tube technology. So, depending on which channel you're really using two tubes. So there's a tube for each channel and a tube that goes in the front of everything else. This thing has a really, really cool vibe to it. It doesn't have a damping switch like the WD800 has. It's kind of set somewhere between medium and low already. It kind of has that sort of vibe, but it does have a symmetrical or asymmetrical distortion, or what is it called actually? Is it distortion or whatever the heck it is? Anyhow, OD, overdrive symmetry control. Is it going to be symmetrical or asymmetrical? And it sounds very tight on symmetrical and sounds less tight on asymmetrical. It's really kind of an interesting thing you have to hear for yourself. And maybe I'll make some videos with sound, but to be honest with you, I spent a lot of money on these things and on role-playing game stuff, and I didn't spend so much money on terms of, being able to capture audio very well on the internet. So my videos might not do it justice anyway. But it's really, really cool control right here that changes the dynamics of the tone quite a bit. There's two channels. You can find all kinds of information about these on other videos, but there's a Subway channel, which doesn't have the voicing control, so it's a little bit different. It also does not sound the same as the D800 or the D800 Plus. It's kind of in that ballpark. You can kind of get that, but it also has this tube feel. And by the way, this is not a dirty amp. You can certainly get some overdrive, neat overdrive tones out of this amp. You can get neat overdrive tones out of the other two amps, to be honest with you. I'll probably get the neatest overdrive tone, in my opinion, out of the Subway channel here. I kind of like that for the dirty tone a little bit more, like when it just starts to break up in the preamp just a little bit. But it is not an amp that's all about the dirt tones. It can be a very clean sounding amp and be very loud and very clean. The Boogie channel is a wonderful animal. It's really kind of a different take on, it's on the bass 400, but it's on the Fender tone stack. It sounds an awful lot like my old Alembic F1X, because it's got that passive interactive network of the bass and mid and treble controls, where somewhere around 210.2 is flat. Here it's more like 1030. I forget exactly what they say, but it's it's not quite as extreme in the flat setting. It also has a mid shift control, which is pretty cool because that kind of shifts where that center frequency is, and it seems to take it from that kind of more classic thing to a more modern thing where it gets a little bit brighter sounding. And as you cut the mids, I didn't really look at all the schematics of how it does it, but kind of like in the Fender tone stack, it first starts with this kind of really wide frequency band, wide Q that's being cut, and it gets narrower and narrower as you make it more and more extreme. It seems to sound like that, and it's just moving, the shift control is moving that around. There's a ton of tones in this boogie channel. Really, really cool. Once you wrap your head around how it works, it's just like lots of fun. You get some really neat tones out of this. I use this at a gig, and you set up a different tones for my harder sounding bass and my less hard sounding bass in the two different channels. Although at the end of the night, I was using the boogie channel for both of them. Not to say the Subway channel is a slouch. It is not, but this is a really, really neat sounding amplifier. You're going to get those kind of fat tones out of this thing that you might be used to for something like an alembic, from something like an old Ampeg or something like that, really, really easily. Which is not to say that you can't get a serious Ampeg vibe or tube amp vibe out of this sucker. And this has a lot of tonal control. Just about anything you want to control and dial in, it has. And this thing right here, you can dial up a good tone almost instantly. They are just all voiced very, very differently. There's not a clear winner in this bunch. There really isn't. Every time I take one out, every time I play one, I'm like, wow, that's the one. That sounds awesome. And as soon as I go to another one, I'm like, man, this is the one. This is really, really awesome. They all have their place. They all sound better with different basses or for different styles, So there's certainly a time I would grab one over the other. But you really can't go wrong with any of these amplifiers. They are really, really cool. And I really dug, when I played through the D800, it was just, I wanted things like the bright switch and the variable high pass filter that I got on this, and I figured it was worth another $100 to do that. Although still, it's a really, really neat sounding amp, and where those frequency centers are set, really, really cool. So the Subway series for me is a big win. They're great sounding amplifiers. They're plenty loud. They're 2 ohm stable, which was very important for me because not a lot of amps are. And to me at this point, I don't want to have to walk into some place and there's 4 2 ohm cabinet or 4 ohm cabinets, so I can't use both of them because the amp isn't stable or is only stable down to 2.67 or whatever the heck it is, or 4. That's not going to do it for me. I want something that's going to be really, really versatile. And these suckers are really, really versatile. They all sound really, really good. They're just different takes on a really good tone to begin with, and just go off, in different directions with these voicings. Really, really flexible, really, really usable. You can dial in a good tone on any of them, and so just clear winners.